You're welcome back to the gavel. The leadership of the National Assembly continued with its engagement with the major government agencies managing the COVID-19 pandemic. This time, they met with the COVID-19 Presidential Task Force, and that meeting was indeed eye-opening.
It's the first day of meetings between the leadership of the National Assembly and the major agencies managing the COVID-19 pandemic.
As parliamentarians,
the leadership of the National Assembly has invited the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs to explain in detail the federal government's intervention initiatives to reduce the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, particularly on the poor and vulnerable members of the society.
you're saddled with the responsibility.
But the principal officers have reservations over the implementation of the social investment program.
Today is a different and desperate situation. And in such a situation, we need to be better in terms of strategy for delivery, and definitely what we have been doing in the past cannot deliver exactly what will resolve or solve the challenges of the most ordinary and most vulnerable Nigerians. So we need to put our thinking cap and work out some strategies on how to identify, because we have a problem of identifying who is the poorest person in Nigeria. I think we have not been able to reach far out there to get them properly captured. We might have been doing our best, but I think the time has come to ensure that in the next few years that we are able to reach out to these people. Whether it's SIP, school feeding, how is the school feeding program faring? We need to review after implementing it for some years, and some of the other programs under the SIP. And we may even need to introduce more programs, really, to address those challenges introduced to us as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Lastly, I want to assure you, Honourable Minister, that the National Assembly will continue to be a very veritable partner in ensuring that all the programs that you handle in your ministry are successful. We want just to be the real stakeholders and take the current situation as a basis for the redefinition, the reworking, and redirecting of our very scarce intervention resources for the benefit of the poorest people in Nigeria.
You met a system, so that has nothing to do with you. But what I will be asking you, imploring you, what we'll be imploring you, is for you to change that system. When you walk into a system that is not 100%, no system is 100%, it becomes incumbent upon you to reform that system. The word reform is something we use all the time. And this is the one time when that word, reform, must be used in the truest sense of the word. The questions are going to be asked. How do you come about your list? How comprehensive is your distribution list? What are the parameters? What is the geographical spread? Again, how did you arrive at the list? So these are tough questions that are going to be asked. But I want you to look at them as frank questions that we need to ask.
Your Excellencies, as you may be aware,
the minister admits difficulties in handling some aspects of the social investment program.
the homegrown school feeding program, I must confess that is also another program that I'm still battling to really understand, honestly, because there are too many intrigues and too many issues there that we're still trying to really unravel. So this is where your Excellencies are. Following Mr. President's broadcast, where he directed the ministry to provide some palliatives to our vulnerable citizens in the country, we're directed to give these palliatives, especially in the area of food relief, to the 3 affected states, or 2 states and the FCT, that are affected by the lockdown. And this aspect is being handled by NEMA. I expected NEMA to be here today.
She also reveals that the federal government has not fulfilled its own obligation to the counterpart funding for the conditional cash transfer.
The conditional cash transfer program is really a very peculiar one, because it's a program that has a counter funding from the World Bank. And in that, in the agreement under this program, there are some conditions and criteria that have to be met before we're able to carry out that program. Nigeria is supposed to put in some amount as a counterpart funding, but I'm made to understand from the debriefing I got from the program heads that up till today, we don't have that counterpart funding from the government. So we are still, using the loan from the World Bank to implement this program.
The Minister of Humanitarian Affairs has come under criticism for the manner in which the ministry has distributed funds for the conditional cash transfer, with many questioning the parameters for selecting the beneficiaries.
Well, number one, these people have been on the register. There's a national social register in place, and this register is responsible for all these vulnerable and poor households that have been identified. It's an existing program, and that program is supposed to give 5,000 naira cash to the poor and vulnerable household per month. We do a round of a month, like 2 months, we pay 10,000. Because of the directives by Mr. President that we should give 2 months advance, that's why we gave out the 20,000. This is a program that has been in existence for quite some time, since 2016. So we are not substituting cash for food. Let me correct that. This is a program that has been in existence, as I mentioned, for years. This is what we met on ground, but we are working on improving it. I assure you that in the next payment cycle, we must have been able to start the digitalization process of this disbursement. But you are also aware that we have very remote areas in this country where we have no option but to give cash. But as I said, we are working on digitalization of this program end to end.
A day after the humanitarian minister met with the leadership of the National Assembly, the special advisor to the President on Social Investments, Mrs. Mariam Uwais, released a press statement making clarification on some issues relating to the National Social Investment Program. In the statement, Mrs. Uwais described as untrue newspaper reports alleging that the National Social Investment Program has gulped over 2 trillion naira since 2016 when the fund was created. She stated that although the total appropriation by the National Assembly from inception of the program is 1.7 trillion naira, the actual funds released is 619.1 billion naira.
The social investment programs.
Mrs. Uwais also stated that the demand for the inclusion of candidates to the National Social Register from the National Assembly has been a recurring issue from the inception of the program. But in a quick reaction, the National Assembly in a press statement says there is nowhere it described the National Social Investment Program as a failure, and the comments at the meeting were not made to denigrate any official, but to make the scheme more effective. It also described as unfair the innuendo by the presidential aide that her rejoinder was issued towards safeguarding the entitlement of the poorest of Nigerian citizens, whose benefits are likely to cease because they are known or connected to members of the National Assembly or any other person of influence.
Now, this is where we call it a day on this week's edition of The Gavel. If you have any views on any of the issues discussed, please email us on thegavel@channelstv.com. Thank you for staying with us and see you again next week.